How's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we're going to be diving into some mid-August quarterback rankings for the 2021 fantasy football season. This list has been updated since July and June going back, and this is about the third or fourth time I think I made this episode throughout the summer here. So sit back, relax, enjoy today's video, drop a like before we get started. Let's hit that intro and get right into today's video. One more quick note before getting into today's video is that today's episode is just my top 15 quarterbacks. If you'd like access to the rest of the top 50 or any of my other positional rankings for running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, or my top 250 big board rankings, which are tied to my player profiles where I assess everyone's fantasy situation, their upside, their floor, their risk for this season, that is on my website, sizzlefantasy.com, where you can check out the 2021 draft guide collection. There's a bunch of great stuff on there, from sleepers to busts to must-own players in every round through the first 20 in 12-team leagues. So there's a ton of great stuff to check out on there. Make sure you do that. But the first guy to talk about today is obviously Patrick Mahomes, probably the consensus wide QB1 this season. I mean, personally, I don't like the value here at all when drafting Mahomes, but that's not to say that he isn't the best fantasy quarterback option this season, because he has the best combo of ceiling and floor this year. Last season, his consistency ratings, which we also have on the draft guide, indicate that he was the safest quarterback on a week-to-week basis when he was out there playing on the field. So everything about Pat Mahomes is to love here this season. Andy Reid's led offense with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. CEH can be a weapon, hopefully more utilized this season, but we'll see. And then he's got Mecole Hardman and other guys there too. So a lot of stuff to like in this Kansas City offense, and in particular, Pat Mahomes leading things as the NFL's best quarterback. Kyler Murray is my QB2 for this season, because when you look at how good he was as a rusher last season, it really skyrocketed him up my board. I thought that heading into this year, Lamar Jackson might just still be my QB2, even after a down year last season. But Murray led the NFL in rushing touchdowns outside of Cam Newton, I believe it was, at the quarterback position. The air raid system they run in Arizona with Cliff Kingsbury's offense is fantastic. DeAndre Hopkins is one of the best wide receivers in the league to pair him with. And then you've got Rondale Moore there, an emerging, well, he's not emerging yet, but I expect him to be a heavily utilized rookie player who can stretch the field, be used as a nice option as maybe the team's third or fourth receiver this year. You still got Christian Kirk there, AJ Green, a vet. There's just a lot of things to like about this offense. And then Chase Edmonds is a great receiving back out of the backfield. So I like the situation as a whole here for Murray. The talent, the skill set, it breeds fantasy success here, and it did last year. So I like the situation heading into 2021 again. Josh Allen, the QB1 from last season, is my QB3 this year, because I expect them to draw back a hair on the utilization he had in the red zone as a rusher last season. He led the Bills in not only passing touchdowns, obviously, but rushing TDs as well. They just signed him to a 6-year, $258 million extension. I don't think they want to put their franchise and the most valuable player that their team has had in years in harm's way more often than they have to. Look at guys like Zach Moss to absorb some of that touchdown production in the rushing game. Look at players simply like Moss and Singletary to just soak up some of that rushing yardage. Whereas Kyler Murray does a great job of sliding, staying out of trouble, using his elusiveness and small stature to get out of the way. He has gotten hit, don't get me wrong, but Josh Allen is trying to put a shoulder down, lay into defenders, and impose his will on others. That's going to get him dinged up. That's going to cut his shelf life short and really hurt the Bills in the back end. So I think they'll tail back on that a bit, but when you've got Diggs as an elite wide receiver one, just like the other guys in this list at the top, they've all got an elite wide receiver to be paired with them. You talk about Emmanuel Sanders coming in, Cole Beasley out of the slot, Gabriel Davis. There's a lot of stuff going for the Bills offense and Josh Allen in particular this season. Lamar Jackson, here's my QB5. Again, or excuse me, my QB4 rather. He was higher at the start of the offseason, but when I really broke down those other two players' fantasy situation and their profiles, I just like them a little bit more. I think Lamar has a really great floor because of the rushing value, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and over the past 2 years averages the most fantasy points per game. And I think his ceiling is as elite as it gets as well. But the passing game, and it's not exactly the most valuable asset in fantasy, as your typical 1 QB leagues have 25 yards per 1 point, as opposed to players when rushing get a point every 10 yards or receiving. But I still think that there's a lot of really, really great potential production to be had here. I'm a bit concerned. I was super enthusiastic about the Ravens' offseason moves to address the wide receiver position, to get in more talented pass catchers, but Hollywood Brown hurt. Rashad Bateman, their first-round pick, limped, hit the deck on a slant route in practice. He's now hurt. It's iffy. We don't exactly have a time frame yet as to when he's going to be back. That's concerning. You're kind of leaving me with injury-prone Sammy Watkins. And again, those players are not expected to be out for the season. Who knows? Worst-case scenario, Bateman might be, but not something that's out there yet, so I'm not going to associate that with anything. But you're looking at injury-prone Sammy Watkins and Mark Andrews, who has been this team's best receiving option for the last 2 seasons, as kind of the only guys left in play here, in my opinion, as significant pass catchers. Maybe Devin Duvernay can step up and do something, but the production has to come on the ground game now for Jackson. Until those other 2 players are back, Hollywood helps him take the top off defenses, and then Bateman should hopefully be that complete player that can run the whole route tree and be used everywhere on the field. But it's going to be a matter of time here before we can tell exactly when those guys will be back out there. Russell Wilson is ahead of Dak Prescott here as my quarterback 5 this season. I just love the ceiling here, and that's the main thing. With Dak's floor being lowered a little bit because of question marks about him returning from injury, him redoing something to his shoulder, he's not in perfect shape right now. He still has to adjust back to the game. Maybe he has a bit of a rusty start. I think that based off what Pete Carroll is saying here, he wants to run the ball more this season. That should hopefully make this offense less predictable. Hopefully Russ can be more efficient and cook on a more predictable basis than he did last season, because the last 2 years in a row now, we've seen the first 5 or 6 weeks, he gets off to an unmatched start, and then he peels off really quick, hits the deck, and everything goes haywire. He loses the efficiency. The ceiling is still there for sure, but the floor becomes incredibly low. I'm hoping if they involve the run game more this season, utilize more play-action passes, hopefully Russ can get the job done at a better clip for us this year. And with that ceiling, paired with hopefully a better floor, it should be a pretty good situation. And then Dak Prescott, again, obviously the next guy up here because I just talked about him. He's got one of the best arsenals in fantasy this season, and going back to Russ, he does as well. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Dwayne Eskridge should be a nice deep threat there as well. But Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb is pretty dang good in its own right there in Dallas. The thing that separates them again is the fact that I think that Russ has just been healthy his entire career. He doesn't miss starts. Dak doesn't either, except for last season, but he's got to come back. And those were, well, the leg was a gruesome injury. He says he's over it, but his body looks like it's overcompensating in other areas. I love Dak. I'm rooting for him. I want him to come back strong this season, so I'm hoping that he can prove me wrong, but also right at the same time, and maybe move up higher on this list, because he was putting up unmatched numbers prior to that injury last season. But maybe if this defense takes a step forward, he won't have to throw the ball quite as much this year, and that volume will come down a hair, which in turn will obviously drop his fantasy production if he can't in turn flip his efficiency and make up for that lost volume there. But Aaron Rodgers here is my QB7. I'm a Packer fan. I openly admit it. You can see Randall Cobb in the background. But I think this is a bit lower than you'd expect him to be on my list. 48 TD passes, I promise you, will come down this year. I would be shocked to see him crack 50. I think that there's just no chance that happens. I wouldn't be shocked to see his touchdown numbers drop by over 10. I think it would be generous to expect 35 TDs passing for this offense this year. When you talk about Devontae Adams, had 18 reception touchdowns. He has been in double digits almost every year that he's been healthy since 2016. But I still think maybe we trend back down to 10 to 12. When we talk about some of the other names on this list that were like Robert Tonyan's of the world catching 11 touchdown passes on just 52 receptions, that's going to come down. I still think Aaron will be a really, really safe player with the ball, not throw interceptions and lose you points there. But I also think the raw touchdown production and those easy points he's getting you in that phase of the game, we're either going to see this offense take a step back, or I think those numbers will be redistributed a little bit more even this season to the ground game, because we saw in 2020 Aaron Jones take a huge step back in his touchdown production. So there's a lot of things changing in this Packers offense. We obviously got Randall Cobb back, Amari Rodgers, our third-round draft pick, so 2 quality slot players. And then we've got a variety of players who can play on the outside. But at the end of the day, I still think Aaron's going to take a step down this year. He won't probably, I'd be shocked to see him finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback, because he doesn't have a rushing element to his fantasy value that we see pretty much all of these other guys having. Even Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott at this stage in their careers still tuck the ball and run it, and they'll find the end zone a couple times. Rodgers might do that once or twice, but we're not seeing him run for even 35, 40 yards per game now. You're seeing maybe every other week he takes off for 18 or 12 yards. So not really a factor here. He's becoming more and more of a pocket passer as he gets into the twilight of his career. Justin Herbert, an emerging name here, kind of looked, I don't want to say he will be the next Pat Mahomes, because that's lofty, but his play style, maybe Aaron Rodgers in his prime is a perfect comparison here. Herbert is a guy who came out, showed he can make every throw last season, get out of the pocket, make throws downfield, tough, unnatural body angles, throwing the ball at arm levels that just you don't see from your typical NFL QBs. This guy's got a heck of a lot of talent, and Keenan Allen might not be a Stephon Diggs, a Tyreek Hill, a Devontae Adams, a DeAndre Hopkins, but he's a dang good number 1 option. He's a target monster. Those two are going to have a really strong connection again this season and put up some nice numbers. I think Eckler will be a nice safety valve in the passing game, hopefully give him some production there. That's not where Herbert's trying to go with the ball, but it's always an option, and he can get nice production from going that route as well. Tom Brady, TB12 here as my QB7. Look, I think that the main thing holding Tom back here, and I actually expected him to be, at this point, I expected everyone on this list to be shifted down about 1 spot, because had we not been dealing with this Deshaun Watson drama, I think either right before Aaron Rodgers or right after, you have to put Deshaun Watson in that category if this is a normal NFL season, if you get what I'm saying here. If Deshaun's not having beef with the Texans, if he's not having these allegations, there's no question marks about him playing, all these guys are slid down about 1 spot. But nonetheless, Tom Brady's still a top 10 fantasy quarterback this season. The same situation as Aaron Rodgers here, is in a really, really good offense, is in a situation that complements his play style very well, but they don't have any rushing value. Tom Brady is not going to go out there and scramble for a touchdown. Your only chance here is if we see him get those 1-yard QB sneaks on the goal line, which, do you really want to try that with your age 44 quarterback? I don't know. I mean, this guy seems to age in reverse, but still not a risk I'd be willing to take, and I don't think would be all that frequent to see at this point. Still, though, the arsenal he's got in Tampa is arguably the best in the league. You can put Seattle right up there. You can put the Cowboys right up there. But that's a dang good spot to be playing football. The one thing I do have as a concern, and I think it's a very legitimate one, is that Tom Brady and the Bucs might be so good through 3 quarters that in the 4th, they might just not have to throw the ball. I mean, there's the chance that they're just whooping up on some teams. Let's not forget they didn't win the division last year, so they're not playing a first-place schedule. They might walk out here and just squish some teams because they returned all their starters. They've already got such a talented group of guys that they might just dominate. So hopefully in those games he can give us enough production or be leading by few enough points that they still want to pass the ball on occasion. But it's no guarantee on a week-to-week basis that Tom will have an elite ceiling, but I think that floor is pretty dang good. Joe Burrow is my QB10 right now. Look, Joe's coming off a big injury. The offensive line got a little better. I wouldn't say it got exponentially better. I would have liked, for Joe's sake, to see them take Penei Sewell. I get the Jamar Chase draft pick. It makes that 3-headed monster at wide receiver look pretty dang good there. But I think that he'll still be a player who, in a high-volume passing offense, can give us good enough numbers, and as a later-round draft pick, is a very valuable fantasy asset. I think that he'll walk in this year, probably not going to run as much as he did last season just because he got kind of banged up, and obviously having a significant injury, he probably has been coached out of doing that as often. But he can still get in and out of the pocket. He can still make throws outside of the pocket on the run and whatnot. He's a very talented, very accurate passer. With Jamar Chase having chemistry back there, T. Higgins, a very good asset, and Tyler Boyd as one of the most underrated wideouts in the league. He's got a really nice situation, a ground game with Joe Mixon as long as he's healthy and out there. I think this is a very beneficial offense and situation for Joe Burrow to be in, not only for his career development, but as well as his fantasy value this year. Ryan Tannehill, he was one of my favorites last season, makes the list here as my QB11. A guy who has underrated ability as a rusher. He's a former wide receiver in college, and he's got 2 X wideouts on his teams. That you don't see that happen every day. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones as a number 1 and 2 option is almost unmatched and unheard of. You see teams, and I remember back to like looking at, even DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett is an unworldly combination. But thinking back to like Odell and Jarvis when they first paired up, that seemed like, oh my goodness, like this team has 2 of the best receivers in the league on one roster. Since then, I think we've had a little bit of a adjustment and kind of a reality check on those 2 guys. But Julio and A.J. Brown is quite the lethal tandem, and when you combine that with Derrick Henry is going to be taking the majority of the defensive focus away here, there is a good chance that we're going to see some fireworks over the top on play-action balls when Julio Jones is out there, and I don't expect him to play all 16 games because we've just kind of come to the realization and the reality that that's probably not going to happen all that often this year. He's still going to put up dang good numbers, and heck, if he plays 10, 12 games this season, look out. When those guys are both on the field, Tannehill's numbers will be crazy efficient. Like I said, he can get it down on the ground as well. He had 35 passing TDs last season and a handful of rushing touchdowns as well. Maybe that comes down a bit, but I think that for an offense that doesn't pass very much, this is one of the best quarterbacks you can get in that situation. Jalen Hurts, not a name I'm overly in love with here, but as my QB12, I have my concerns about his passing ability, just to throw and make accurate passes, but the legs, the rushing upside, that potential is what I do love here. The Saints hadn't allowed a 100-yard rusher in over 50-some games, and then Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts running read option both hit that marker in one contest. Again, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's maybe not even Kyler Murray in his ability to run the football, but he is more athletic than your average starting NFL quarterback. This offense's personnel has gotten a little bit better this offseason as well. They drafted Kenneth Gainwell, Devontae Smith. They get back Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz from injury, so hopefully this can be a sign of improvement. Apparently, Jalen Hurts has been checked down Charlie to those tight ends at camp so far this season, but hopefully he continues to progress as a passer and get better in that phase of things because that'll help him out a lot in terms of his fantasy value as well. Matt Stafford, this is going to be a really efficient offense. Heading to the Rams is just miles better of a situation than Detroit was. He doesn't have a wide receiver, I would say, that's the caliber of a raw talent as Kenny Golladay last year. But he also really wasn't playing with Kenny Golladay last season to begin with because he was injured the whole time. Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp might be, it's hard to say because I was going to say it might be the best 1-2 tandem that Stafford's ever had, but just the fact that Megatron was so dang good on his own, even having an average player line up across from him would be a pretty lethal combination just because you're having Calvin Johnson get doubled every play, but it's up there. We'll just say that. I don't want to say anything too, I don't want to make too hot of a take today on a Thursday morning. So Matt Stafford nonetheless, though, in Sean McVay's offense, it is the best coaching. It is one of the best offensive lines probably. It's an older offensive line, but it should get the job done. The run game will be there schematically, although Cam Akers' talent won't be on the field. Henderson should still be able to get the job done. Play action balls will be on the money this year. Bootlegs will be out there for Matt Stafford, and he's got a cannon. So if he can find Cooper Kupp and help his fantasy game elevate back up to the ceiling that we once saw, this should be a pretty good situation and a fun one to watch here this season. I think the Rams will win a lot of games with Stafford under center. And then at QB14, Deshaun Watson, look, he'd be a lot higher on this list if we just simply had answers. I couldn't tell you. I'm trending towards, I told people in my Discord chat, I was saying, be really careful with Deshaun this year. I had people asking me, do you think he'll play? I was leaning towards no. Now I've flipped a little bit. The fact that he's just at Texans practice tells me I think he will play for a team this season. I don't think he wants to play for the Texans anymore, but I do think he wants to play football. And I think it would be incredibly odd for him to show up to training camp, even if it is just to avoid a fine, to then not suit up on game day and not take a game check. You get what I'm saying here? He has some guaranteed money, a lot of guaranteed money, but you're still going to see fines if you're not showing up to team activities. So maybe, I've heard the Panthers are checking in on him, the Eagles. That would be a nice situation. Him and Devontae Smith would probably be pretty dang good together. But we just need to know. It'd be lovely if you just say, hey, I'll play for Houston this year or whatever. But he's not going to do that because he still wants leverage. He still wants out of there. He's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, though. Last season led the NFL in passing yards, had a good touchdown count as well. He can run. He's had an ACL injury, but he still moves well. He's still young. I think he's only like 25 or 26. Come on, Deshaun. Give us answers, man. I'd love to put you back up in the top 10, top 5, 6 players if I could. But last but not least, Trevor Lawrence is my quarterback 15. In the fantasy community, I think we're overvaluing Trevor a little bit. He's someone I've seen a bit too high on other players' boards. And I simply ask you to look back at Joe Burrow last season. This is kind of the same situation I see here. You're obviously the first overall pick in the draft, so you did terrible the season before. You'll have an easy schedule this year, as does Lawrence, as did the Bengals last year, outside of division play. But Joe Burrow's numbers weren't all that great, and you can't expect rookie quarterbacks, that is, to have great numbers their first season starting in the NFL. It's just an unrealistic expectation. The game is so hard, and there's so much competition that it's not feasible for us to do that. Joe Burrow had 2 monster games against the Browns, and everything else was relatively average. I think that Trevor's offensive weapon core isn't that much better, if at all, than what Joe Burrow had to work with last year. Obviously, since he's added Jamar Chase, which I think then bolsters that group and makes it even better. But DJ Chark, is he really even better than a T. Higgins? Marvin Jones is a really savvy vet, but Tyler Boyd is at this point as well. I think that maybe Joe Mixon, you could say, is a little better than James Robinson. He's probably got more talent than James Robinson, but from a production and availability standpoint, they're probably at close to an even playing field. Maybe Joe Mixon gives you a sizable enough advantage to just kind of prove my point that the Bengals really aren't that better of a situation. And then Travis Etienne comes in this season, obviously, as a rookie. You've got Laviska Shenault as kind of a chess piece. But I don't know. I think Trevor will be throwing at a high volume, at a high clip, just like we saw Burrow doing last year. But I think he'll be taking a lot of sacks. This team will be losing a lot of games, again, which helps his production ability. But like we saw with Joe Burrow, that doesn't always mean, and I'm not saying Joe Burrow's bad. I've got him as a top 10 QB this season. I love his situation. I love his talent. But you kind of need a year to a year and a half under your belt to truly understand the game, things to slow down, and to become more efficient. The turnovers will drop then. There's no doubt Trevor Lawrence, he looks like a generational arm talent. But I'm just saying, let's be a little bit cautious, patient, hesitant here. He's a top-end quarterback too, so you should be drafting him. You should roster him. But he shouldn't be depended upon as a QB1 in a lineup starter, because that's just not typically the vibe we get from rookie quarterbacks. Look at Kyler Murray. He didn't do it. Lamar Jackson really wasn't valuable as a passer his rookie year at all. Just go back and simply look at Justin Herbert. Might be the one big exception where he was putting up fantastic numbers last season as a rookie, but they still weren't coming in the most consistent stretches, and he had a meltdown performance against the Pats. So it's not a given. That's the point here. The upside's great, but let's just be a little bit more hesitant on his floor. There you go. So those are my top 15 quarterbacks here in mid-August as we are rapidly approaching the NFL season. We're less than a month away. NFL Sunday kickoff is coming. I can't wait. So if you're new around here, again, make sure to subscribe if you want to join and get more interactive content here on the channel. The link to the community Discord is in the description of today's video and all the videos I put out here on the channel. So I'd love for you to take advantage of that, become a participant there, hop in some mock drafts with me, maybe even join a league with me as well. So Thank you all so much for joining today's video or stopping by and watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.